My name is Kim. I run a company called Lyra Communications. Been doing this for 7 years, specializing exclusively in social media. Before I begin, I want to ask, how many of you guys have Twitter accounts? Put up your hand. How many have your smartphone with you currently? Okay, good. Whip out your smartphone. The hashtag for the conference is DigimarCon Canada. Please, everyone tweet right now what a great time you're having, and then keep your eyes on Twitter and retweet everybody else's tweet, because it is really quiet in the Twitter sphere, and I feel like I'm the only person tweeting here. Next thing is, I need a volunteer who will tell me when it's 11:30. Otherwise, I will speak until 3 in the afternoon. So, okay, staff in purple, thank you. Oh, look, we've got that. And then 11:45 too. Yeah, good. Okay, and I think my last question is, how many of you are managing a social media program either on behalf of a brand or an employer or your own brand? So, okay, good. Trevor mentioned, where's my thing here? Trevor mentioned how good it was that I was following Jordan, and absolutely. And the reason for it is that Jordan talked a lot about social and content marketing and what we need to be doing. In my presentation, let's get there. So what I'm going to talk about is a lot of social media, but I'm going to take more of a tactical approach. And the reason for it is that when Aaron called me in, I guess it would have been March, the beginning of March, and asked me if I would present, and we talked about what I was going to present about, I was having a shite day. And the reason I was having this terrible day is because in February, Twitter changed its, well, actually, Twitter introduced a brand new algorithm. And I had just gotten all the reports for all of my clients back from that month, and looking at all the traffic that was suddenly being generated, yay, or not being generated, that huge drop in traffic. And I was like, oh my God, really, Twitter? What new social media hell is this, right? So I said to Aaron, I'm like, okay, I want to talk about all the changes that happen in social media all the bloody time, because I've been doing this for 7 years. The only constant in social is change, and we have to be agile. And what I find is that the amount of work that my team does now to get the same results that we got 4 years ago for our clients, we are probably doing 6 times the work. And this is the reality of social media. So the question becomes, how do you run a social media program, community manage, create the content, get those same results, if not more? Our bosses always want more, and not lose the will to live. It's really tough. So this is your social media survival skills program. I am not going to advise that you drink your own pee or use big knives or anything like that, but I am going to show you ways that you can deliver a social media program, a couple tips and tricks that we've learned over the last 7 years that has certainly kept me and my staff sane. And take out, I guess, the ones that resonate with you, and feel free to implement them into your own social media. So over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the changes. That's literally one slide. This is where we all get to commiserate and bitch together. Then I'm going to talk about the 7 survival tactics or tips. And then, I won't suggest you drink bodily fluids. Coffee is fine. It is social media. It's not the Arctic. And after that, then we're going to have a Q&A session for 15 minutes or so. But having said that, if you guys have questions as I'm talking, please feel free to shout them out. If you can't get my attention, then, I don't know, do a jumping jack, throw a shoe at my head, do what you have to do. But I don't stand on ceremony, and it keeps things flowing, and it keeps it more interesting. So please talk. Okay, so let's start out with what we have to navigate in the social media world. None of these things are really new. But the first thing that is a big frustration is just the sheer amount of noise. I remember in 2009 when we would do Twitter for a client, it was amazing. Oh my God, Twitter 2009. I fantasize about it. We could do 1 or 2 tweets a day, and that was like, wow. And I used to bitch. I'd bitch, oh, there's so much noise on Twitter. It's so noisy. Man, it's hard to get that 1 tweet a day heard. But people would be retweeting it. Could you like it back in 2009? I can't even remember if we had the like thing back then for Twitter. But, it was just, People would be following in droves. It was so bloody easy in comparison. And now we have to tweet a minimum of 20 times a day. That doesn't include retweets. It doesn't include thank you, shout outs, mentions, proactively reaching out. That's all in addition to the 20 tweets that we schedule. And that's really not enough. And now I have this new bloody algorithm to contend with. We'll see what happens. New networks. This is something else that as social media professionals we are constantly thinking about. New networks, they fall out of the sky. And I cannot tell you how many clients will say, Kim, I heard about this new network, Elo. Don't you think we should be on it? We're going to talk about that a few slides on. But it is a consideration. It is information that's flying at us all the time that we have to consider. The next thing, new technology. Oh, yeah, so because I do social media, sometimes it's like I don't talk to real people in the real world, except for my best friends, all the software sales guys who call me every week. And thank God for them. They keep me in touch with the real world. But there is so much new technology, and sometimes it's necessary. If an algorithm changes, if a new network comes on board, suddenly Pinterest opens up their API to measurement and analytics, but only a few tools have access to them. So that's something else to consider when we make changes because of new networks or algorithms, new technology. Then we get into, new rules on old networks, because all those things before that wasn't enough. Well, we all did, but who remembers Facebook, January 2015? I remember it. I remember the tears and the frustration, because that's when Facebook changed its rules. Not its algorithm, although just for good measure they changed it too. But they changed the rules for how we as brands can advertise and how we treat our timelines and the types of content that we can actually put over our timelines. I'm a small company. We're 4 people. And I remember I had to go back in that 6 weeks notice that Facebook gave us. I had to rewrite 5 strategies, which is a lot over my Christmas vacation. There was a lot of scotch involved. It was a big thing, and it was frustrating as hell. And then we get into, I'm going to go to algorithms, because of course we all understand algorithms. Jordan was talking a little bit about algorithms, which is fantastic. Certainly as social media professionals, we need to read about them, understand them, work within them. If we're good enough to game them, fantastic. Although that's a tough thing to do nowadays. And of course, they drive content expectations. So obviously, the networks themselves have different content expectations, and they enforce those by use of the algorithms and their best practices. But we have to remember, too, that social media is not really driven by algorithms. It's driven by people, real people. And we all have our own preferences. And what we expect to see on social media networks changes constantly. So a case in point is last year, it was all about short videos. It's like short videos became the new thing, and everybody and their mother are posting these short snippet videos. And when I say everyone and their mother, by the way, I am talking about brands. I'm not talking about individuals, although certainly individuals do it too. And so this year, you know what? Just posting some kind of sublimely mediocre short video on your Instagram doesn't cut it, because it's not charming anymore. We've all seen it. It doesn't get our attention. I am a social media addict. You know what? I don't click on that stuff anymore. I want to see really well-produced videos. I want something that's going to capture my attention. So really, the content expectations have changed. It's more and more and more and more every day. Constantly, day after day, week after week, month after month. How do we as professionals handle this? How do I run a social media business and remain profitable? How do you, if you are a community manager for a brand, be able to roll with all of these changes and not have to spend 24 hours at your desk? I'm going to show you some things you can do. So survival tip or tactic number 1 is know your strategy. I know this is really basic, right? But let's talk about what this really means and why you really need to have a strategy. First off, I don't care if you're a solopreneur, one person in your company who's doing your social. If you are doing social, you've got to have a strategy. I mean, it doesn't have to be some 150-page tome on your social media, but it does have to have a strategy. Your strategy is going to allow you, empower you to streamline your budget, streamline your efforts. Your strategy should contain the following things, and this is pretty basic. Your goal, and that goal is your organizational goal. Your objectives. The objectives are not, our objective is to get 14 likes on Facebook today. Your objective is things like bums and seats, right? This many conversions. And then you get into your target demographic. Jordan also mentioned this a little bit. He's quite right. You have to really analyze your target demographic. I like to call it the 2 Ps. What is your target demographic passionate about, and what are they pissed about? Where do they live? What do they do? What would they rather be doing? Know these things. Even if you're not quite sure how it's relevant to your brand, you have to analyze these things because this is going to drive the next part, which is key messages. If you're working for a larger company, chances are your marketing department, you're doing this in tandem with your marketing department, you already have your key messages. But if you're doing this for your own company or for a small business that hasn't quite done that yet, gotten to that stage, then your key messages are messages that are basically you're selling your service or your product, but you're doing it in a way that is palatable to your target demographic. So you're hitting on those 2 Ps, and basically you're trying to get an emotional response. This is going to drive the kind of content you create, right? So I'm not saying whether or not you should do a video yet or you should be on Facebook yet. This is just the messages, you guys. Once you have that, by knowing your target demographic, then we can really talk tactically and figure out which network you should choose. If your demographic are, lawyers, you're working in a law firm or representing a law firm and it's a corporate law firm, you know what? Snapchat may not make the best sense. So you really need to know this. And another thing as well with strategy is you want to make sure that when we're thinking about where we should be on social media, which networks we should adopt, you're also looking internally. How many networks can we handle? How many employees do we really have who can do this? So ladies and gentlemen, if you take nothing else from this presentation, take the fact that even if you're a solopreneur, invest in getting a strategy. That whatever, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 that you spend will be the best amount of money you spend because it will save you so much money. And more importantly, if you don't really care about the results, because not having a strategy is going to screw your results. It's going to help you save your sanity. Because every single client I've ever worked with, and so we work with our clients on execution on 12-month contracts. And I do that specifically, and I touch base with them with accountability meetings every 3 months. And the reason for it is that especially if they're just getting started on social media, always, month 3.5, the client will come to me and say, Kim, it just feels like we're shouting into the void. We're not getting any results. We're not seeing people come in. Where's the momentum? What are we doing? Should we pull back? And I pull out the strategy and I say, okay, let's take a look at where we're at. And because we have a strategy, we have milestones. Because we have a strategy, we're measuring against those milestones every month, every quarter. So I can say to the client, you know what, I know it feels like that because we're just in the first 3 months, 3.5 months. It takes time. Social media is a high-touch, long-term tactic. But, look, we have met these goals. We've met these metrics, and we know that these metrics are supporting these objectives, and we know these objectives are supporting the organization. So remember our strategy. Remember the other 9 months that we have to go. Be patient. Let's stick with the strategy. It helps you to remember why the hell you're there when you question it, because ladies and gentlemen, believe me, you will question it. Everyone does. Survival tactic number 2, choose new networks wisely. If you're doing social media within a larger organization, I'm going to bet dollars to donuts that at some point, and this happens to me all the time with clients, an executive has popped by your desk and said, John, why aren't we on Snapchat anyways? My niece said that Snapchat is the best network out there. It's the fastest growing. It's newly acquired or is about to be. Snapchat's where it's at. You know what? Yeah, depending on your demographic, Snapchat may absolutely be where you're at. But of course, being a diligent professional social media professional, you have a strategy that you're working with, right? And so if it's a tough thing. It's a really tough thing. Of course, usually you can just pull out the strategy, but when a client comes to me and says, Kim, why is it that we're not on this network that my niece says that we have to be on? Here's what we look at. I look at a couple of things to determine which networks we should be on, and I do this in the strategic part as well. So it's not just new networks that come our way, and figuring out whether to take existing dollars and split it up. It's also just about figuring out where to be. So think of the following things. First and foremost, because you've done your strategy and you have all that great information that Jordan said you should have on your target demographic, where are they? Are they on Snapchat or are they on LinkedIn? If you are running a law firm and it's corporate law, they're on LinkedIn. Snapchat may be all that and a bag of chips, but chances are it's not going to get you the results. So that's one thing. The next thing we look at is noise. So maybe a lot of our demographic is on, let's say it's Twitter. There's a lot of noise on Twitter. It's a lot of effort to get through that noise. Is there another demographic that has a reasonable density of our target demographic, right? But maybe it's just a little less noisy than Twitter. If so, it really is a game sometimes of quality over quantity, and that might be a better use of your marketing dollars or marketing time and sanity. Another thing that we look at is internal resources. This is a big one. This is a huge one, actually, particularly a couple of years ago when Instagram became a lot bigger, so about 2-3 years ago. And I guess it's always been an issue with Pinterest, although Pinterest was big, and then it had a wilderness, and now it's come back full force, which is nice to see. But it may make sense that your organization does need to be on Pinterest and on Instagram and Polyvore and House and all of these highly visual networks. But you know what? If you are a staff of 2 and you have no pictures and nobody knows how to take a picture and there's no desire to start taking pictures and your target demographic really needs high quality, beautiful pictures, think of House, right? House, for those of you who don't know, it's really about home decor and home design, and the pictures are stunningly high res and beautiful. So if you don't have that, then even though it might make sense for you to be there, how are you going to keep that going? It's not realistic. So that's something else that we look at in order to figure out whether or not it makes sense to be on the network. And the final thing we look at, and this is a big one, is the future viability of the network. Right now, I would think long and hard before I put a brand new client with a brand new Twitter account on Twitter. I don't think Twitter's going to go anywhere, but I don't know. It really hasn't hit its targets over the last couple of quarters. It laid off a couple of months ago. They introduced this new bloody algorithm, which is driving me crazy, which means that they're trying to revamp their advertising, which is pretty good because their advertising is kind of sucked to date. So, should I put my clients there? There's so much noise, 20 tweets a day. I don't know. I would sit back. Anybody who invested all their time and energy last year in Meerkat versus Periscope, I'm sure they're kicking themselves now, right? So this is something as well. When a new network arrives on the scene, a lot of hype, they're getting funding, this is where we have to be, look how fast it's grown. Sit back, have a coffee, see what happens. I usually give it at least 6 months to a year before I put a new client on that network to see what's happening. So the next one, social survival tactic number 3. Have a plan of attack. Okay, this is really tactical, obviously. So when I talk about this, I'm actually I'm acknowledging the fact that I can sit here very easily and say, oh, you should be tweeting 20 times a day. And you guys are probably thinking, what? WTF, seriously, Kim? Like we have time to do that. Hi, we have lives and jobs and families, and we'd like to see them now and again. I know, I totally get that, I do. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to deal with that. So I have a story. I think this was I don't know, I'm really bad with time. Maybe it was 2010 or 2011, but my first community manager, my first employee, Haley. So Haley was working with me. She's a community manager, and in my business, my community managers also write the content that they're community managing. So they have 2 jobs in any given month, A, to write the content for the month that's coming, and B, to community monitor all the accounts in the month that we're in. And at the time, Haley didn't have really too many clients. We were just still pretty young. And she, in my head, she should have been working 50% of her time. I was only paying her for 50% of her time, right? So we sat down one day and I said, well, Haley Jane, according to this many clients that you have, you should only be working a maximum of 4 hours out of the day. She kind of looked at me. She took a breath. And then this gleam came in her eye. And I wasn't quite sure if she was going to burst into tears or if she was going to drop kick me. But either way, I kind of sat back a bit in my chair and I'm like, Haley Jane, are you okay? And she looked at me and she said, don't you understand? I am spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day community managing these feeds. It's all I do. I log on constantly, every like, every comment, every retweet. I am there for every client, and it takes hours. And I kind of looked around like, so is the problem the content you're writing? And she's like, no, you're not listening. It's the community management. So I met with a friend of mine who is a productivity consultant for small businesses, and she said, Kim, this is all these details. You need to sit down with Haley and you need to block out time for community management. Realistically, it should have been taking her less than an hour a day in total to be community managing. So here's what we do. Every single morning, noon, and night, my community managers log on to the client accounts that they are managing. Guys, it doesn't take long. We're not managing Coca-Cola Inc. Come on. So, how long does it realistically take? Anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes. Do a couple of retweets, answer, go on Facebook, check everything out, make sure there's no spam, make sure there's no contentious issues brewing, make sure that everybody who has commented or shouted us out gets a true human response. And at the end of that literally is 15 minutes a day is only 45 minutes. And there's discipline around it. At first, she was very, very bad at it, right? Because there's that sense when we're community managing, oh my God, I have to respond within 2 minutes. Well, yeah, that'd be nice, but it's not realistic. What is realistic is 3 times a day. That gives you enough time that you're being responsive enough to comments and to questions, but you're not killing yourself in the process to do it. Believe me, that more than anything will help you save your sanity if you're working in social, particularly if you're managing more than one brand, or you're managing one brand, but it's not your full-time job. You have other things, other hats that you're wearing. All right, survival tactic number 4. Influencing others. This also gets a little bit more in depth as to what Jordan was saying. So one of the things we want to think about when we're trying to streamline our efforts and survive the social media world is how do we get more ROI, more return on the content that we're actually creating. So a gentleman named Dr. Robert Cialdini wrote a book called Influence. And in this book, he outlined 3 ways that people are influenced, 3 things that influence people. I don't know if I should be over here, maybe? I feel bad. I miss you guys. I'm over here. Anyways, and so the really good news here is that these 3 things are actually super easy to incorporate into social media content. So the first thing, and I should back up. Why do we want to influence people? Well, we've mentioned a couple times all these new algorithms. The algorithms are pretty much without exception based on promoting content, showing content that has engagement around it, because that's how the algorithm can determine that a piece of content is high quality and thus would be of interest for you to see, right, and for your community to see. So the whole trick here is to really generate engagement around that content. So we do that by influencing people to engage, hopefully, if we're any good at it. So how do we do that? How do we get good at it? According to Dr. Cialdini, the first thing is the aspect, reciprocity. It's all about reciprocity. Andrew, if you guys were here in the morning or early in the morning for Andrew's talk on LinkedIn, I really loved how Andrew mentioned that idea of reaching out to the super connectors. I wish I had thought of that. I mean, it completely makes sense. And so if you're going to take Andrew's good advice and reach out to the super connectors, let's change the word connector to influencers, right? One of the best ways to get their attention and to create that rapport is to start sharing their content on social media as in other areas of life. You got to give to get. share content generously, engage generously. That will create a sense of reciprocity with those whose content you are engaging. And then in addition to that, those who may not be influencers but are absolutely within your target demographic are going to go on your feeds and see that you are generous, that you are sharing. And they're going to be more likely to share your content as well, right? This can be tough, by the way, in the corporate world. I have had many a client, and particularly with Twitter, where they'll say, we don't want to do retweets. The only thing that should be going over our feeds is our branded content. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard this. Oh yeah, Jordan's like, hell yes. Here's what we do. We say, okay, I understand, and I do understand. Of course I get that. However, the culture on Twitter is a generous culture. It's something that I stand my ground on this. I say, okay, give us a list of approved accounts that we can retweet, because the option to retweet or not is non-negotiable if we're going to be on Twitter and we're going to be successful. And that works, But I do not, we retweet on every single account every single day. You have to. Reciprocity is that important. The next thing is likeness and likability. And these two are really linked. So the whole idea is that people are going to be more inclined to share and engage our content if they like us, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. People will buy from us when they know us, like us, and trust us. People will engage in our content. What actually breeds like? Well, generally it's likeness. It's when our target demographic can recognize themselves in our content. Then they think, oh, wow, they really understand me. The people who work at that company, they get me. So how do we get our target demographic to recognize themselves in the content? Well, again, I know I'm a broken record. It goes back to your strategy. Hey, you got to know what's important to them, obviously, and how your product or service works into that. And then you want to use language that reflects your target demographic. If you're working with a strategic company, your corporate culture, the language of your corporate culture should already reflect your target demographic, right? So hopefully you're not going to have to make too big of a leap there and piss off your executives. But it is something to think about. So how do we do that, tactically? What does it really look like? Well, I would say you want to use hashtags, the same hashtags that your target demographic is using, especially on Instagram, totally on Instagram. You know, Twitter for sure, but that's pure Instagram. Another thing is if you have a geographically located business, okay, we all have geographically located businesses, that was a redundant comment, but you know, if you can use geotags, let's say you have a restaurant or a bricks and mortar store, right? Use the same geotags as your target demographic so they know you're a neighbor. That's a big deal on social media. It's so wide, so noisy, so broad. When you actually can talk to a brand that is located 8 blocks away, you know, or 5 miles away, that's kind of special. It makes me, oh my God, you're in Toronto too, so am I. Let's go for coffee. So use geotags. Talk about the maybe events, holidays that you know that your target demographic is talking about. Hit on those topics. The issues, whatever issues they have, these are the issues that you want to be talking about. Remember I mentioned the 2 Ps. What are they pissed about? What are they passionate about? Particularly the what are they pissed about. If it is appropriate within your brand to be able to touch on those issues, touch on them. Go ham on them. Your target demographic will thus recognize themselves in everything you're posting. They will be so much more inclined to share, so much more inclined to like you. They might even begin to trust you. And once you have those 3 things, they may buy from you. The third thing is authority. So basically, and we all know this, right? This is why we all retweet journalists. We will be more inclined to engage with content if we feel that the content comes from an authoritative source. So the question becomes, well, how do you become authoritative? Couple of things. This is tough. I mean, really, you have to be creating a ton of really high quality content. So consistency is the key to being authoritative on social media. Consistency in terms of when you post, so frequency, you have to be posting with a consistent frequency. So once a day on LinkedIn, once a day on Facebook, 10 times a day on Twitter, but the same every day. Be consistent. People will come to expect it. Consistency in terms of quality of the content that you are creating. Believe me, it does not do you any favors to post like an amazing mediocre blog. No one's going to say that was the best mediocre blog I've read in a long time. No one cares. It's got to be good every time. And if your strategy is to become an authority in your field, in your industry, this is super important. So, and the final thing, what I had, consistency and quality, consistency in terms of frequency, and then consistency in terms of the value that you're offering. Offer your target demographic as much value as you can possibly give away, and then give away a little bit more, right? I come and I talk about this stuff, and people say, why are you sharing your secrets? Why are you telling your clients how you manage their programs? And I'm like, well, because they're not hiring me. Like, they're hiring my company because they don't have time to do it themselves. They don't want to do it themselves. There's no conflict here, guys. So be generous with what you give out. That is how you influence people. That's how you get action around your content. That's how you start to hate algorithms, the algorithms. I'm such a purist with social media. I really am. I can't believe they touched my Twitter. Bastards. Okay, so I know I'm emotional. When I heard in January, and they were talking about Twitter going to 10K, so potentially like 10,000 characters, I almost had a mental breakdown. I'm like, no, don't touch my Twitter, 10,000 characters. Don't even think about it. So they touched it a little bit, but I can handle the changes. I'm okay. Taking the meds, I'm fine. Survival tactic number 5, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Okay, this is big. And this always seems to amaze people that you can do this. Of course you can do this. You have to do this, otherwise it's too much. No mere mortal can handle the sheer amount of content that you require to be super successful. Jordan touched on this a tiny bit as well. This is why, like seriously, between Jordan's presentation and my presentation, you guys have an entire social media course. So if you knock yourself out and you spend that instead of 1.5 hours or 3 hours writing an amazing post, right? Remember Jordan spoke about that. So let's say, for the sake of this conversation, your post is called The History of Tea. Speaking of which. So you're writing about the history of tea, and so it goes up, right? And I think Jordan mentioned as well that we have this, a lot of organizations, we kind of just put up our latest and greatest content, and then we forget about it. It kind of just goes out into the ether, it fades away, we never think about it again. Big mistake. I mean, look, you got 40 employees all writing content, don't worry about it. But for most of us, here's what we can do to truly leverage each piece of content. We're going to recycle it, we're going to tweak it and reuse it. So let's say we post that great 800-word, The History of Tea, right? Out of that, I think we should probably write about 20 tweets promoting it. I'm not saying tweet the same thing 20 times. I'm saying write 20 separate tweets that are all promoting different aspects of the blog. How about 5 Facebook posts? How about 5 LinkedIn posts? You're going to throw all of those into an Excel spreadsheet, and you're going to be recycling them over the course of the year. If you are blogging, say, 2 times a month or 4 times a month, you're going to do that for every single blog post. So now you've got lots of, social media content that's going up, that's all promoting your blog. Let's say with your blog you now have 15 minutes left. Oh, I've been talking so long. So now let's say, okay, I'm going to talk about this and then we'll just go right to questions. So now let's say you're getting a lot of good feedback on the blog. Take that blog and turn it into a script for your next video. Post it onto YouTube. Once it goes onto YouTube, you can make another blog post promoting the actual YouTube video. Take your YouTube video, break it up into 10-second segments. Why not? Whatever snippets. Share that wherever you want to share it. Share it onto Facebook, share it onto Twitter, share it onto Instagram. Take the images from your blog, make sure that goes onto Instagram and Pinterest. Don't waste content. No piece of content should ever be left behind. Now let's say you have a YouTube video, you're used to speaking verbally about a topic, fantastic. Go become a guest or host your own podcast. Once you've done that, invite all your friends over and have a blab. Did you know that when you have a blab, you can download the video and you can upload that video back onto YouTube, which then you share onto your blog. And remember, every blog post is creating 20 tweets, 5 Facebook posts. This works like a well-oiled machine, and you know what? All this content is coming from 3 hours of writing one fantastic blog. Guys, it's not rocket science, and believe me, when you start to recycle your content, it makes all the difference. And the beauty of this too, the nice unexpected added benefit, because really, we're just doing this to save our sanity, I'm trying to save the world here, is that every person who consumes that piece of content through those various mediums, they're different people. Who watches your videos? They're not going to be the same guys who are reading your blog or reading your newsletter, which, by the way, your blog should be included in your newsletter. Same article, right? Google's not going to fault you for that. So that's a really important thing to take away. Okay, don't spam, right? Don't spam. We know that. Keep your evergreens at home. If you're going to use this tactic of recycling your content, make sure that your blogs are evergreen. The difference between an evergreen blog and a non-evergreen blog is this: the history of tea versus amazing flavors of tea at Christmas. The former, we can share that for years, right? We can make so much content around that and promote it and drive traffic to your website. The latter, we can promote that for 3 weeks in December. Woo, right? So you really want to try to write about evergreen topics. If you have a very robust blog, you're blogging, say, 4 times a month or more, 8 times a month, then definitely maybe do one of those blogs, something that's timely, spring trends or whatever, Christmas trends. But otherwise, keep it evergreen and keep it at home. You guys, I know this is a bit sacrilegious in this crowd, but I am not a big fan of LinkedIn Pulse. If you are struggling to write content for a content marketing program and you don't have 16 blogs a month or 24 blogs a month, then I say put your blogs on your website, promote them on the social, just the way Jordan was telling you. Promote them across the social, let those links go back to your website. LinkedIn doesn't really need those clicks anymore. They're doing just fine on SEO. We don't need to support them. So if you have leftover content that you can put into a LinkedIn strategy, fabulous, great. But if you're struggling to keep a blog up, and I say this because I know 80% of us are, then keep it at home. So with that, you survived. Les Stroud is jealous of you. Americans in the audience, Les Stroud is the Canadian version of Bear Grylls. We didn't have to drink any pee. And are there any questions? Yes?
This is going back to the earlier one when he was talking about reposting the content, and you just brought it up again, but you were also talking about not spamming. And I just wanted to, what are your thoughts on the idea that you can repost content, but this whole idea of ads and having them run 7 times for redundancy before people can even acknowledge that they exist and stuff, versus a user on one of my feeds who's seen the content.
Well, this is where, it's an excellent point. So if you're going to recycle, you do have to recycle carefully, right? So if you have, when I mentioned that you're going to write 20 separate tweets that are linking back to that blog, you're not going to post them bang, 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 bang. You can't do that. You can't. So, ideally, when we work with an organization that already has a blog, we are sharing, we're spacing it out. Then that's the only thing you can really do is space it out very carefully.
Yeah, I wondered if there was particular tools that you were using so like, this is run already, don't show it to the people.
Databases. So we use a database, and the database actually tracks the last time that we used that post. So we're just, we know, and remember too, on something like Twitter, we're tweeting 20 times a day, so there's a lot of content, right? So we may only share the same actual tweet, we will share usually about twice a month, but believe me, nobody notices. Yeah. It's so noisy. Sure. Like, I'm not encouraging people to spam. Absolutely, nobody likes a spammer. But let's be realistic in terms of what people really notice. How do we use Twitter? By the way, did all you guys tweet about the conference? Yeah? Did you? Do it again. Seriously, guys, we got to create some buzz. It's the first year the conference has been here. Anyway, so social media brain, right? Tangents. So yeah, so the trick is keep a database, know exactly when you last used the content, and then you want to be interspersing it very carefully. Most people aren't going to notice. I'm not saying that the odd person's not going to notice. I mean, but 99.9% of people don't use Twitter in a way that they're going to notice that to any great degree. And if they end up accidentally clicking on the same blog, I don't think that's problematic for what you were saying, right? We need to see things. Repetition is good. Next question. Yeah.
I work for a large manufacturing company. Snapchat is not one of our.
It's not your key priority, but it's Snapchat.
No, so like for example, one of our target audiences would be engineers.
Yeah.
Snapchat is just not there for us. So I'm not familiar with Snapchat, but there is a campaign that I'm working on that I am thinking about because it will be a bit of a different demographic. I don't know anything about Snapchat. Can you talk a little bit about Snapchat and contests particularly? Like how does it work? What does it do?
You know what? So we don't do too much with Snapchat because Snapchat it is a very different type of medium. And generally Snapchat, I mean, for your target demographic, hell no. No. It is for it used to be exclusively teens on Snapchat. So my son's not a teen, he's 21 now, but he was really big on Snapchat when he was like 18, 19. And it was a big deal. Snapchat now has become a little bit more mainstream because we have stars using Snapchat. It's bigger in the fandom world, and we have Snapchat chat. But, in terms of doing contests on Snapchat, before you even think that tactically, you're going to I go back to your strategy, because if you're going to do a contest, why Snapchat? There are other, I think there'd be...
How does it work on Snapchat? That's my question. Like,
Are you going to do a contest?
I don't know what Snapchat looks like.
Let's talk about it offline then.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's an offline conversation. I'll show you. Okay, other questions about surviving social media on coffee alone? Yes, Jordan.
Can you talk a little bit about the usefulness of Twitter chats and brands jumping in on Twitter chats and maybe what they are?
I just had this conversation actually this week with someone. Well, first of all, everything I say, take it with a grain of salt, because it remains to be seen how the algorithm is going to affect that. We used to do Twitter parties. We haven't done one for a while because we work with our Twitter parties. We worked within a very specific demographic, basically mommy bloggers. But up until February, and now it remains to be seen with this algorithm, Twitter chats were a really great way for brands and for individuals who were interested to come together. And so what it basically was is that you could have a conversation with a brand, perhaps it's with a star, right, in the world of fandoms, and the entire conversation would be organized by use of hashtags. And of course, generally speaking, when we host a Twitter party, people have to RSVP. Now, anybody can ask the questions that we're asking. It might be that we're asking on behalf of a brand, right? Or it could be that you're having a Q&A with your favorite star, similar thing, or everyone's just getting online to talk about the latest episode of Game of Thrones. But either way, usually with an organized brand Twitter party or Twitter chat, there are prizes and giveaways for those who RSVP and then actually respond to the questions. And the whole reason for doing it, the objective is generally, it's more of an advertising objective. It really is about garnering impressions, and the impressions that can be garnered through a Twitter chat or a Twitter party it's incredible. And we did one years ago, and we got 6.5 million views over the course of an hour. And Canada's a small country. Our brands tend to be a little bit smaller. Getting that over the course of an hour is like running an ad during the NHL playoffs. So so this is why we would do a Twitter party. Now, the big thing is with the algorithm, we haven't done one since the change. But generally when you run a Twitter party, you're using software, and you're using software to organize. And so everyone who attends, not everyone, but a lot of people who attend the party often, if they're really serious about it, will use this software too, that is aggregating all this data based on the hashtags. The problem with the algorithm for those, the algorithm is sort of what's it called, negative option, opt-out, right? So most of us have the algorithm unless we have chosen to opt out, is that those conversations become interrupted. And in a Twitter party where so much of the content has so much engagement around it, I think there's the potential for all of those things to be really out of order. So I think it would become very hard to actually figure out, the right order of a conversation. So all the tweets come to you out of order, basically, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's where we're at with Twitter parties. And it's funny because, people don't ask me about this stuff for like a year, and then suddenly I get all these questions this week about it. And it's the one week where I'm really not sure. For us, the jury's still out to see what's going to happen with this algorithm and how we can work within it. So, any other questions? You guys are a quiet crowd. Holy smokes. Getting for lunch. I understand. I'm with you. Okay, well, thank you so much for Oh, one more question.
I was just wondering what your opinion on where Twitter is going. It seems like they're very confused, because in the App Store, I think they just switch categories to like a news app.
I know.
So,
Yes.
Are they a social network? Are they a news app?
You know what?
Are they like?
Facebook said the same thing, eh? I know. When I read that, I was like, I love Twitter. Twitter's my favorite. Have you noticed? And so Twitter has now come out and said, oh, we're not a social networking app. Well, you could have fooled me, because they are recognized. They don't want to be competing with the likes of Facebook and of all, LinkedIn. And of course, one of the most incredible uses of Twitter, my favorite use of Twitter, is when we are following a news story, right? So they're really trying to capitalize on that and reposition themselves a little bit. But when I read that, I was just like, wow, exactly like you, Twitter, what are you doing? But having said that, the next article I read was an older article where Mark Zuckerberg had pretty much said the same thing about Facebook. So, so I think it's just sort of, with these large networks, they've plateaued, right? They've all plateaued.
It's not semantics anyway, like news and social media is the same thing. How is that not the same thing?
You know what, from a user perspective, probably yes. From a marketing perspective, very different. Yeah, but from your perspective, yeah, it's pretty similar for sure. The difference is that we get a lot of our news now through our friends via social, so it's only news that interests us, right? So now the news is coming to us if it's of interest to us. The algorithms help with
Kind of like
that.
only watching Fox News, though. It's the news that's only interesting.
Well, when we watch Fox News, we go to Fox News, right?
Yeah.
We go buy a newspaper. We turn on Fox News. With social, it comes to us. It's reversed.
Is
And
that really true, though? I mean,
absolutely.
On the algorithms and your personal preferences and the things that you choose to hide, they tweak your newsfeed to show you what you want to see.
Yeah, so if you and I are like, we're best friends on Facebook, and you're posting all this really great stuff that I love to read, Facebook knows that I'm I guess ingesting your content. So Facebook is going to show me your content, which really works for me because I love everything you post. Maybe we've got something in common that I love to read about. So that news is coming to me through you, thanks to Facebook's fantastic, albeit frustrating, algorithm. All these algorithms, I bitch about them from a marketing perspective as a brand marketer, but from a user, except for Twitter, they're good. They are good. What they tend to do is they keep the integrity of the networks high, which is a good thing, right? Because otherwise, if it gets too spammy, Twitter got too spammy years ago. I think about 4 years ago, I almost gave up on Twitter then too. I was like, I'm not putting any more clients on Twitter. It's not worth it. It was so spammy. And then they were just about to launch their advertising, so they tried to clean it up, and it got a lot better. Now I think they're doing the same because now they've realized, our advertising sucks. We need an algorithm to get better results for our advertisers. And part of that is always about cleaning up the spam on Twitter. So, it's sort of like, do you choose a new network when it comes out? Do you choose to get off an old network because it's having trouble? These networks have been around a long time now, you guys. They've been around a decade. So there's longevity. So it remains to be seen, and I watch carefully.
For millennials, what percentage of time do you spend on different social networks, like Pinterest compared to Twitter? Like, what do you?
As a millennial, how much time do I spend?
Well,
That's
no,
the
for
best thing
millennials.
anyone has said to me in like years. As a millennial, I don't have time for social media. I'm not partying all the time.
When you target millennials,
Yeah.
and as a millennial,
Yes.
how much do you what do you concentrate on? Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and what's the proportion of the time that you spend on each?
It's a hard question to ask because it depends on what you're selling, who the demographic is within millennials, and what your objectives are. And I'm sorry, I know that's not a sexy, easy answer. but it's an honest answer. It really depends. I mean, you know, there are some millennials that really love model trains. There are some millennials who are absolute Tolkienites and are all about the world of fantasy television and books. There are some millennials who are all about Red Bull and partying and college, right? It really depends, and they all behave differently. So in the actual strategy, when we're going through that, these are the questions we ask, and we answer them based on the research that we do when we actually write a strategy for a client. Because I could sit here and say, oh, well, if it's millennials, sure, put them on Snapchat. But I don't really know. It really depends on what we're trying to do. If it's millennials who are really all about model trains, maybe Snapchat's not the place for them. I don't know. So we really look at this in a strategic process, and that target demographic analysis is absolutely critical. It's critical. Yeah.
Can you expand on that? So, I mean, you know, there's been a lot of talk of posting things, retweeting, and basically just blasting as much as possible content out there, and hopefully it'll catch on here and there. Can you talk a little bit more about the targeting aspect, where you first find the people you want to talk to, and then are there other channels, are there different channels other than Twitter, or are there channels within Twitter to hit just those people and not waste my time?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so first of all, it has to be high quality content. Lasting out high quality content, hotspot style, isn't a problem. Well, it is if you kind of get to the tipping point where it's truly too much. But as long as it's high quality content, you can have a high frequency on certain networks. Not on all the networks, not on Facebook, doesn't even matter anymore because you got to pay for play, but not on LinkedIn, for example. So you're talking about how do you streamline then within it? Well, that really comes down to your community building, right? So one of the things that a lot of people forget about with social, and I haven't even touched on it here, is about community building. So on Facebook, how do we build a community? Facebook is brilliant. I love their marketing platform. With Facebook, provided the client has enough money, we can go in and we can create a community as big as they need it to be and as targeted as they need it to be, right? So we can create a community of 20,000 22-year-old model train enthusiasts, no problem. And then all of that content that we're putting out is going to be seen by them when we advertise on Facebook. So say we boost a post, so not advertising, but boosting a post, we're going to go back and forth between showing some of those posts to our demographic that have liked our page, but we don't want to exhaust them. We don't want to wear out their patience. So, you know, the other half, we will boost to people of the exact same demographic in the Facebook general community who may not have liked our page yet. So they may still really love our content. And then generally when we do that, we get a lot of organic likes anyway. So it really kills two birds with one stone. On Twitter, it's a little bit harder. So with Twitter, we, from the get-go, have told our clients, you know, we try to aim for about 50% of your followers within your community, to be within your target demographic. But it's much broader because the way to build followers on Twitter is it's still pretty organic. I mean, we'll use automated tools to do that organic process for us. Follow, 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 unfollow, unfollow, unfollow. But fundamentally, it is organic. It's not like Facebook. Well, of course, on Twitter, you can advertise to build your community, but I think it's a complete waste of money. You can still do that for like manually or using automated tools, and it's way more effective. So, but you know, I guess on Twitter, if you really had the millions of dollars and you wanted to build it by advertising, then you would also have the ability to target that community as well, right? Remembering too, people are going to like your page who are not in your community, and there's always going to be sex bots who just love you. I mean, that's just social media, right? What can you do? Kim, why are these sex bots following us? Why is so-and-so following us from this country? They're not real. Don't worry. Please do not engage. Yeah, so does that answer the question? I mean, and it's the same across the various networks. You know, it's the same with Pinterest. It's the same with Instagram. Of course, Instagram being piggybacking on Facebook's platform, you can actually advertise now within Insta. But I don't think you need to. With Instagram, it's still most effective, I believe, if you have a limited budget, to do that manually, albeit using automated tools. Okay, is that really? Okay. How much time do we have? Am I just going to keep going until you kick me off the stage? Okay, good.
You got another 5 minutes.
Oh, good.
So
I think about it in terms of fandoms, because this is what I do in my free time. I'm a total fangirl. And you know what? I turn 42 next week. I'm 41. So almost a millennial. Millennial times 2. I'm a super millennial. So I totally, I mean, it's embarrassing, but I totally follow fandom blogs on Tumblr. I follow, and may or may not run, a few Instagram accounts that may or may not have a lot to do with Tolkien characters and Silmarillion characters. I don't really, in the Tolkien world, I probably freaking do fit the demographic. Who am I kidding, right? But definitely there are lifestyle things where you do look at the lifestyle first, right? So someone in the Tolkien sphere, well, hell, if I were someone who wrote Tolkien fanfic, it would be entirely possible that people who read my fan fiction, I get comments from people that I always think they're young. I always think they're 16-year-olds, right? And so because you don't know. And I get people say, I read a part of this to my 12-year-old daughter, and she really loved it. And I'm like, you're a real person. You're a man. You're a dad. Whereas I had a girl who was, I don't know if anybody knows the term betaing. It's someone who edits your fanfic, basically. I had a beta reader, and at some point she told me she was 13. Holy shit. So I could not put any sex in that fanfic at all. It takes a village. I'm a mother. I was like, oh, okay, let's change my plot. So again, it just goes to show you though, right? I mean, so if I were actually running some sort of a social media campaign for a client that had to do with fanfic, you're right. I have to look at the lifestyle, not just the age or the sex or the geographic location. Having said that, it really depends, So entertainment is really, I think that your comment that the two are not correlated is absolutely makes sense for things like entertainment. Probably not so much for lifestyle products, right? Then I think you're probably looking more demographics. Things like fashion, we've done a lot of work in fashion, half and half, maybe. Home fashion demographic. So it just depends. But again, when you're in the strategic process and you are doing the analysis on your demographic, these are things that you're going to look at, right? You're going to look at their behavior. You're going to look at exactly who they are. And you're right, you may not be able to divide it up on the lines of age or sex or geography. So it definitely behooves us to take a very close look at our target demographic to make sure that we really are capturing all of them and not making those assumptions. That's a brilliant point. You have more. Excellent.
This is my second question.
Yeah.
What do you subscribe to that gives you sort of like the latest on social media or a better understanding of sort of the way social media is going with?
What do I subscribe to? Wow, that's a great question. Everything and nothing. I find that if I don't sit down and take time out of my day and do some research about every 2 months, I start to feel behind. I feel like, oh, I don't know what the hell's going on. So I will go to, Mashable is my favorite. I know it's super mainstream, but Mashable rocks. Always has. I love that they're Scottish. They're great. So I definitely do Mashable. I don't do Pulse because Pulse tends to be people like me who don't do what I do quite as well, who are blogging about it, so I find that unuseful. Having said that, you know what I miss? I miss blog search on Google. The way I used to do it was just via blog search. And nowadays I will search like Twitter, new algorithm 2016, minus 2015, minus 2014, minus 2013, and onwards, and then go to the news items or go to the blog that pulls it up. That's how I do it nowadays, and I find that's the most effective way to do it. I really do miss Google Blog Search because that's where you could find, it was searching the blogs, it would pull up stuff that maybe was published a day ago by some small company, but really good stuff. That's where I used to get it. So it's a bit more of a challenge now to find it, quite frankly, amidst very older articles that are just not quite as, maybe they're a month old or 2 months old, and that doesn't help me. So yeah, Mashable is my favorite though. They're pretty good. Social media today is always great. Huffington Post, no, not for that. Those two. Okay, so guys, thank you so much for listening to me for a full hour.